Namaskar and very good morning to everyone. With the blessings of Honorable Founder President Sir, Honorable Chancellor Sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor Madam, under the guidance of Dr. Selvamurthy Sir, Dr. B.C. Das Sir, and Dr. Rajiv Sharma Sir, we are organizing this Cancer Cluster Webinar Series 7. And today we have a speaker, Dr. Devvrat Dixit. Briefly, I will go through the introduction of panel members here. Dr. B.C. Das Sir, the Dean and Chairman of Dean of Health and Allied Sciences and Chairman of Amity Institute of Molecular Medicine and Stem Cell Research. Dr. Rajiv Sharma Sir, we have he is a Director General of Amity Science Innovation and Foundation, STEFIA. Sir is also scientific advisor of Honorable Founder President Sir. We have Dr. Pankaj Sharma Sir. He is a professor in Amity Institute of Biotechnology, AUP Noida. Dr. Pallavi Agarwal, she is Associate Professor and Ramalingam Swami Fellow at Amity Institute of Molecular Medicine and Stem Cell Research. We have Dr. Amit Kumar Pandey. He is a faculty in Amity Institute of Biology, Amity University, Haryana. We have another panel member, Dr. Subrajit Biswas. He is a professor in Amity Institute of Molecular Medicine and Stem Cell Research. So before I introduce today's speaker, may I kindly request Dr. Rajiv Sharma sir to give introductory remarks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Dhruv Beckley, and thanks for organizing this webinar by Dr. Devvrat Dixit. We interacted with him actually, our panel of experts interacted with him earlier for under our mission B4. That is actually our founder has started this mission, very ambitious mission to bring at least 500 brilliant brains, actually brilliant and bright brains to India in next 5 years. So under that, actually, we have been actually interacting with various people actually who are abroad actually and working and doing very excellent research, and their outcome is very strong actually. So in that connection, we have contacted Dr. Devvrat actually, and we are happy that he came here actually, and he has agreed to give this webinar to share his work with us. So I'm looking forward to his talk today, and the interaction with our other audience here also. Dr. Devvrat, you will find actually in the participant actually there are many Ramalingam Swami Ramanujan fellows actually who will be participating in this, and this will also give you opportunity to understand what they are doing if they interact with you actually, if we have time for that. I'm sure actually otherwise we can also offline also we can discuss all those things. So I'll hand over to Dr. Dhruv Beckley for further proceeding.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And may I kindly request now Dr. B.C. Das sir to say a few words.
So thank you, Dr. Dhruv, and there is nothing much to, but I once again welcome. We had interaction with the speaker, Dr. Dixit, and I once again welcome you for the presentations, and the topic looks to be very exciting title, and I know you have done excellent work, and in fact I am excited because of the fact you come from my alma mater. You are our BHU Zoology Department product. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, zoology in BHU, which is famous, and so then again you are also did your PhD from NVRC with the guide whom I know very well, whom I was the expert to promote her to the professor positions. So it is all the way very well close to us. So I will, and your topic is very interesting. The epitranscriptomy. We know epigenomics, but epitranscriptomic, what is it that those who are in cancer would be interested to know. And then the topic glioblastoma is a very, very aggressive cancer, and there are a huge number of people are working in this field, and there are several the postdoctoral fellows are coming with the neurology or cancer background, having their interest in the glioblastoma. So this is one of the aggressive cancer, including the pancreatic cancer and triple negative breast cancer. There are a few cancers which are of interest for the researcher, and I think glioblastoma is one of the most important cancer, and we will look forward not just for the talk, and we look forward that if you are the intention of this meeting and the presentation is that you look for that you join and you are looking for that. So if you join here or elsewhere, so you continue to do good work, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you once again. Welcome, and please go ahead, and I hand over to Dr. Dhruv, please. I welcome all the panelists as well as all the audience who are in the field of cancer and glioblastoma, working in this field, because it's a cancer cluster. So all are on cancer mostly. So some are related field, but they are mostly on cancer. One way or the other, they are related to cancer specialist. There are several panelists showing that Amit is there, and Dr. Dhruv, Dr. Pallavi, and Dr. Biswas would be there, and there are many other people. And also Dr. Selvamurthy may join later. So thank you. Over to Dr. Dhruv.
So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and views. And with this, I take this privilege to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Devbrat is my immediate senior from BHU, and we had a very good time in BHU. And he did his bachelor and master's from BHU, from geology department. That's alma mater of Dr. VC Das sir, the same department. And then he moved to NBRC, Haryana. He did a PhD on a brain cancer, glioblastoma. And then he moved to USA for his postdoc. And briefly, if I introduce Dr. Devbrat, he's doing great as a postdoctoral fellow, as a senior scientist at Cleveland Clinic. And he joined Dr. Jeremy Rich Lab. And he introduced to the cancer stem cells area, tumor microenvironment, and epitranscriptomics. It's a field of epigenetics. It's related to the epitranscriptomics and epigenetics area, both. In these labs, he also got training in the cutting-edge genomic techniques, including high-throughput screening and next-generation sequencing. Using a high-throughput genetic screening approach, he identified novel genetic dependencies important for tumor growth in intracranial microenvironment that he got published in Nature in 2017. And he also studied, worked on RIP sequencing, iClip, RNA-seq. Okay, he has established the role of RNA M6A, a modification, and its reader YTHDF2 in glioblastoma stem cells. Okay, that paper got published in 2021 in Cancer Discovery, which has around 25-30 impact factor. He has also performed a whole genome microRNA screening and identified a novel microRNA network and RNA processing machinery important for a stemness phenotype and cellular hierarchy in glioblastoma. So his present training in the field of epigenetics, epitranscriptomics, he would like to continue to explore and contribute to the budding field of RNA modification. That's epitranscriptomics. It's a very new area where very few scientists around the globe is working. And he's trying to explore the role of cancer biology, leading to the development of RNA-based therapeutics. Glioblastoma is a major unmet medical needs, and identification of the targetable epitranscriptomics circuitry and its interplay between tumor metabolism has potential to develop new and more effective therapies for glioblastoma. So his main area, his main research is mainly focused on glioblastoma, where he's trying to link all these epigenetics, transcriptomics, metabolism together to find out a solution for this glioblastoma. So with this, I invite today's speaker, Dr. Devbrat Dixit, to share his research. So it's over to you, Dr. Devbrat.
Dr. Dhruv and Dr. Devbrat, just a moment. I think I would say that you are speaking on the cancer cluster. This is a brainchild of our Honorable Founder President, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan. There are several clusters. There I think it has reached to 12 or 15 now. So there are genome editing, genome engineering, and the cancer clusters and neuroscience clusters. So these are the brainchild of our Honorable Founder President, sir. And if you want, and see, Dhruv is the coordinator, Dr. Dhruv, and also I think Amit is also from the Haryana Amity, Haryana. So if you want, Dr. Dhruv can add few words of the cancer cluster. So you are speaking on this cluster. So yeah, please.
Yeah. So this webinar, this lecture is being organized under the umbrella of Cancer Biology Cluster, as we discussed earlier. And this cluster has more than 50 members. And this cluster is one of the first cluster that we had organized, that we had created in Amity. And it's a cluster. In this cluster, we have our members from all Amity universe. We have a co-coordinator, Dr. Amit Kumar Pandey from Amity University, Haryana. And we have organized several international as well as national webinars under this cluster. Right now, we have more than 20 clusters in Amity, like cancer biology clusters. We are having artificial intelligence and so on, other clusters like that. So I welcome you, Dr. Devbrat, and all the panel members and the participants in this webinar, which we are organizing under the umbrella of Cancer Biology Cluster. So welcome you again, Dr. Devbrat, and now I request you to share your research.
Great. Thanks, Dhruv. And a very good morning to all of you. And first of all, I would like to thank the Professor VC Das, the organizing committee, Dhruv, and all the Amity University for giving me this opportunity to introduce. Can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. So it's in presentation mode now?
Yes, it is.
So today I will present a brief overview of my work and my postdoctoral tenure with Dr. Jeremy Rich. And the title is like a broader title where I have explored the epitranscriptomic mechanisms in glioblastoma stem cells. So a very brief introduction, as I think all of us know that glioblastoma is one of the most aggressive of all the cancers, and it comprises 28% of all the central nervous system tumors, but it's the cause of more than 80% of all the deaths due to central nervous system tumors. So this is highly aggressive tumor with a mean survival of less than 14 months. And the aggressiveness and lethality of the glioblastoma is attributed to the presence of cancer stem cells, also called as glioblastoma stem cells. There has been extensive efforts to characterize, identify, and target glioblastoma stem cells. Presently, the consensus in the field says that a glioblastoma stem cell can be defined by its ability to be able to give rise to a full-grown tumor from a single cell, and the tumor grown from these cells recapitulate the tumor heterogeneity of a patient tumor. So glioblastoma stem cell in a tumor can reside in two different cellular states. One is a quiescent state, one is a proliferative state. In a quiescent state, these cells are just in a small number present in a tumor, which is growing in a patient. But when the tumors encounter adverse microenvironment, or say a therapy like radiotherapy or aggressive chemotherapy, these quiescent stem cells start proliferating and they quickly give rise to these tumors, which is why it's so hard to target these glioblastomas. A minimal, like a maximum surgical resection followed by adjuvant chemotherapy and radiotherapy, which kind of eliminates more than 80% of the primary tumor, is still, because of these stem cells, a new tumor grows within 6 months, and the recurrence rate is 100%. So the extensive effort has been dedicated to target these stem cells. And there are different nodes where people have tried to target the biology of GSCs. The major fields of study are the microenvironmental factor, which support GSCs, the epigenetic regulation of GSCs. GSCs completely transform their epigenetic signature. And one of our previous publications that Drew mentioned, we have shown that these GSCs have completely different epigenetic landscape and dependencies. Similarly, recently, people have been focusing on the metabolic reprogramming of GSCs, and immune therapy has always been there for decades, I would say, but now it's taking a leap towards the personalized therapy. Apart from all these fields, post-transcriptional regulation in GSCs is kind of a budding and very new field, which is my field of study and my interest, which I'm gonna talk today. Drew, sorry, is my slide visible properly?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Because, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So I'll give a brief introduction to RNA M6A modification. M6A modification is the most prevalent modification of nascent and mature mRNAs. Like any other modification of DNA, RNA, or protein, these modifications are also regulated by 3 different class of proteins called writers, readers, and erasers. So writers are methyltransferases, are the proteins which install these modifications on messenger RNAs and other RNA species. So the complex of metal 3, metal 14, and WTAP are the only writer complex known for M6A. Similarly, there are demethylases or eraser proteins for M6A, and the known eraser proteins are FTO and ALKBH5. In past few years, a whole bunch of reader or M6A binding proteins have been identified, and a couple of reports have suggested that they might have both oncogenic and tumor suppressive roles in different form of cancers. So this is really least understood and new area of study. So this is kind of a summary of what I just showed. So moving ahead, we decided to explore the RNA M6A modification in glioblastoma stem cells, and we compared the whole genome M6A profile of glioblastoma stem cells with normal neural stem cells as control. So this is the brief summary of our experimental strategy. So after performing M6A profiling, we were able to identify a specific mRNAs which were tagged with RNA M6A modification, both in glioblastoma stem cells and normal neural stem cells. And we see that the landscape of M6A modification is drastically different between neural stem cells and glioblastoma stem cells. To our surprise, the genes, the set of genes which are considered as the glioblastoma stem cell signature genes, they were heavily enriched for RNA M6A modification. So this gave us the first indication that M6A marks important genes in GSCs. We further explored the importance of M6A tagged genes by exploring the Broad Institute essentiality data set, where they have performed whole genome CRISPR screens on a whole bunch of cancer cell lines, and they have assigned and identified essential genes for different cancer types. And so we explored their data set for glioblastoma, and we find that many of the M6A tagged genes were among the essential genes for the glioblastoma tumors. So this indicated that probably we are studying a really important modification. We further explored the role of M6A modification by overlapping M6A modification data set obtained from GSCs and neural stem cells to their gene expression signature. So we overlapped the M6A dataset with the RNA sequencing dataset from the matched cell type. And what we observed that several of the differentially expressed genes in GSCs, they also have gained M6A peaks. And as a whole, the dataset on the whole indicates that genes with M6A peaks are overexpressed in GSCs. To further establish the role of modification in a patient tumor, we mined the TCGA dataset, curated the differentially overexpressed genes in the GBM patient tumors and overlapped it with our M6A dataset, and we again observed that genes which are overexpressed in a glioblastoma patient tumor are tagged with M6A in GSCs. We took MYC as an example here, and MYC is one of the most explored and probably the oncogene for many aggressive cancers. And as we see that MYC is selectively tagged with M6A only in glioblastoma stem cell models and not in neural stem cell models. Similarly, MYC is heavily overexpressed in GSCs and glioblastoma tumors. So this indicates that important oncogenes in GSCs are tagged with M6A. On the other hand, genes which were down-regulated in GSCs, which means they are up-regulated in normal neural stem cells, they lack M6A modification. We took MN1.
No, just a interruption. Sorry to interrupt. What is this? The M6A. This is a group of mRNA, or from the product of the particular gene, or a group of genes?
Sir, M6A is a methylation modification for RNAs. So a methyl residue is added to the 6th adenine in an mRNA, which is known as M6A. So it's like the way we know about DNA methylation, similarly, this is the methylation of RNA species.
Okay.
So when we say that M6A signature, we are talking about the genes and mRNAs which are tagged with M6A in a particular cell type.
But what is that genes? There's a specific gene identified for it.
Yes, sir. So for example, I can show, like if you look at this volcano plot, we are identifying genes like MYC, OLIC2, and CSPG.
Nick, I will come to later in your presentation. Please go ahead. Your observation is fine. The MYC is a multifaceted molecule. So it can be oncogene, it can be anything, because this is a gene involved in a huge number of things. So that
Yes,
cannot
sir.
be a specific gene for glioblastoma.
No, so that's what I said. MYC is a broad range oncogenic transcription factor, but it is considered one of the most important molecules in many cancers.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So similarly, here we see that the genes which are down-regulated in glioblastoma stem cells, they lack M6A modification on their mRNA, and their expressions are down-regulated. We are taking MN1, which is a gene called as meningioma 1, which is a very well-known tumor suppressor, meningiomas and glioblastomas. So a tumor suppressor, we see it lacks M6A modification and its expression is down-regulated in the tumor. So further, we performed gene set enrichment analysis on M6A tagged genes, both in GSCs and neural stem cells. And we observed that M6A tagged genes in glioblastoma stem cells, they enrich for pathways like transcriptional regulation and transmembrane transport, cell-to-cell communication and signal transduction, and down-regulation to UV response. Whereas in neural stem cells, the M6A tagged genes are mainly enriching for the pathways like nervous system development and proliferation. So it indicates that M6A tagged genes perform different functions in different cell types. So moving ahead, till now we have the indication that important genes in both glioblastoma stem cells and normal neural stem cells, they are tagged with M6A modification. So we decided to explore the different molecules which are important for the M6A modification, and we explored their expression in glioblastoma stem cells, comparing them with neural stem cells. So here we mined the TCGA glioblastoma dataset, and we see that YTSDF2, which is a reader protein of M6A, is heavily expressed in high-grade glioblastomas. When we compared it in our cell models using Western blotting, we again observed that YTSDF2 and one of the M6A writer proteins, metal-14, they are overexpressed in glioblastoma stem cells in compared to neural stem cells. So we decided to study the functions of metal-14 and YTSDF2 in glioblastoma stem cells. First, we started with the writer protein, and we knocked out metal-14 using specific sgRNAs, implying CRISPR technique. And what we observed that when we knock out metal-14, we see a decrease in the viability of glioblastoma stem cells in vitro. But when we performed in vivo tumorigenesis experiments in mouse models, the metal-14 depletion doesn't affect the tumor formation ability of these glioblastoma stem cells. So we decided to move ahead and study YTSDF2. So YTSDF2 is a member of YTH family proteins. And when we started this study, at the same time, a paper came which said that the YTH family contains 3 different proteins, YTSDF1, YTSDF3, and YTSDF2, and they have functional redundancy in terms of M6A binding. So instead of focusing just on YTSDF2, we decided to explore the function of all 3 YTH proteins. But I would say luckily, that made my life easy, that knockout of YTSDF1 and YTSDF3 doesn't affect the viability of glioblastoma stem cells significantly. Whereas YTSDF2 depletion very aggressively affects the viability of glioblastoma stem cells in cell culture. We also explored the stemness phenotype of GSCs upon YTSDF2 knockout using limited dilution assays and sphere formation assay. And we observed that YTSDF2 depletion leads to decrease in the stemness properties of glioblastoma stem cells. Further, when we exogenously overexpress YTSDF2, we see that these phenotypes are reversed, establishing that YTSDF2 is necessary and sufficient for the survival of glioblastoma stem cells. We further moved ahead and performed an in vivo experiment. And here you can clearly see left-hand side, the Kaplan-Meier curves show that YTSDF2 depletion leads to better survival of tumor-bearing mouse, and the tumor formation is very drastically hindered upon YTSDF2 depletion in these mouse models. So the results, till now, our results establish YTSDF2 as a dependency in glioblastoma stem cells. We further explored the different data sets obtained from different cancers. Again, we mined the Broad Institute pan-cancer dependency data set, where this is a very useful data set where they have performed whole genome CRISPR screens on a whole bunch of tumor cell lines from different tumor types. And then they have derived a dependency map for the different molecules in different cancers. And when we explored the YTSDF2 in their data set, we see that YTSDF2 expression is apparently essential for the survival of most of the cancer types in Broad Institute dataset. So this establishes a kind of pan-cancer importance of YTSDF2. So conclusions thus far that RNA-M6A peaks mark and potentially regulate critical cancer-specific genes in glioblastoma.
सर आप मुझे बता सकते हो आपको भी कौन कौन दिखाई दे रहे हैं उसमें पार्टिसिपेंट्स में, क्योंकि ये वाले पार्टिसिपेंट्स तो मुझे दिख रहे हैं.
Hello. Hi. So the conclusions thus far that RNA-M6A peaks mark and potentially regulate critical cancer-specific genes in glioblastoma in a location and cell type-specific manner, and YTSDF2 is a specific and potential regulator of glioblastoma stem cell viability and stemness. So moving ahead, we decided to explore the mechanism by which YTSDF2 regulates the viability and tumorigenicity of glioblastoma stem cells. For this, first we mined the TCGA dataset, which is a broad gene expression data set from glioblastoma patient tumors. And we explored the genes whose expression is correlated with YTSDF2 expression. And then we performed an enrichment analysis, and we see that the genes positively correlated with YTSDF2 expression in glioblastoma patient tumors, they enrich for MYC targets, E2F and translation machinery, and oxidative phosphorylation pathways. To further identify the specific target genes, we performed RNA sequencing upon YTSDF2 knockout in glioblastoma stem cells. And we find that 512 genes are downregulated upon YTSDF2 knockout in glioblastoma stem cells, whereas 498 genes were upregulated upon YTSDF2 knockout in glioblastoma stem cells. The downregulated genes really looked interesting. That cohort looked really interesting because it again comprised MYC, VEGF-A, and IGF pathway genes, which are really known to be important for glioblastoma tumors. Again, the gene set enrichment analysis points us towards the MYC target genes, and translational machinery might be the target of YTSDF2. So I specifically want to draw your attention on this graph. Here, what we did, we took the M6A profiling data set that we performed in glioblastoma stem cells, and we overlapped it with the RNA sequencing data set obtained upon YTSDF2 knockout. And we asked whether we can find a trend which indicates the importance of M6A in the whole process. And what we observe that the genes with upregulated M6A peaks in glioblastomas, they tend to get downregulated upon YTSDF2 knockout very significantly. So this indicates a general trend that YTSDF2 regulates M6A tagged mRNAs in GSCs. Now, since M6A is since YTSDF2 is a RNA binding protein which binds to M6A tagged mRNAs, we wanted to identify the specific direct targets of YTSDF2. For this, we performed clip sequencing, which identifies binding location and binding partners of a RNA binding protein at single nucleotide resolution. So we performed clip sequencing on 2 of our normal neural stem cell lines and 2 of our patient-derived glioblastoma stem cell lines. And what we observed that RNA binding activity of YTSDF2 is heavily diminished in neural stem cells, whereas it's really enriched in glioblastoma stem cells. We identified the consensus M6A motif in YTSDF2 bound transcripts, which in all 3 cell types, which indicates that YTSDF2 binds to M6A motif and M6A tagged mRNAs. We were able to identify YTSDF2 bound mRNAs using ClipSeq, and we found around 1,000 mRNAs were bound to YTSDF2 in glioblastoma stem cells, whereas roughly 536 mRNAs were bound to YTSDF2, which were also tagged with M6A. So now we are trying to overlap 3 different high throughput data sets here: the M6A profiling data from glioblastoma stem cells, the RNA sequencing data that we obtained upon YTSDF2 depletion, and the YTSDF2 clip data. So the idea is to identify messenger RNAs which are M6A tagged, which are directly bound to YTSDF2, and they are perturbed upon YTSDF2 depletion. So this analysis will give us the direct M6A tagged YTSDF2 targets in glioblastoma stem cells. So as the chart in the left-hand side shows, that we had 498 genes which were down-regulated upon YTSDF2 depletion. And when we overlapped it with YTSDF2 clip data set, we find 63 mRNAs which are bound to YTSDF2 and they are down-regulated upon YTSDF2 depletion. Among these 63, the important and interesting targets were MYC and VEGF-A. Similarly, when we overlap all 3 data sets, we again find out 30 mRNAs which are M6A tagged, which bind directly to YTSDF2, and their expression is down-regulated upon YTSDF2 depletion. And again, MYC and VEGF-A feature into this small cohort of 30 messenger RNAs. So we can say that we have identified 30 M6A dependent YTSDF2 targets in glioblastoma by combining 3 different high throughput techniques. Here is an example of YTSDF2 binding on MYC mRNA identified by clip sequencing, and we can see that YTSDF2 binding to MYC is present only in glioblastoma stem cell models and not in neural stem cell line. So this function is specific to glioblastoma stem cells. Now we asked what YTSDF2 binding to MYC or VEGF-A functions. For this, we performed RNA immunoprecipitation, and we tracked the half-life of these messenger RNAs upon YTSDF2 depletion. So we can see in the left-hand side the results from RNA immunoprecipitation, YTSDF2 RNA immunoprecipitation. It clearly indicates that YTSDF2 binds to both MYC and VEGF-A only in glioblastoma stem cells and not in neural stem cells. And in glioblastoma stem cells, YTSDF2 knockout by CRISPR leads to huge decline in its half-life for both MYC and VEGF-A. So this experiment suggests that YTSDF2 binds to MYC and VEGF-A and stabilizes their mRNA. Now, the question was whether this stabilizing effect of YTSDF2 on MYC and VEGF-A or any other YTSDF2 target mRNA is dependent on the presence of M6A modification. This was a kind of a complex question to address, and for this, we decided to take two different approaches. One was a kind of indirect approach where we decided to erase M6A mark from its target mRNA and used YTSDF2 binding to the target mRNA as assay. So we knocked out metal 3, which is the writer of M6A modification. And we can see that metal 3 knockout leads to global decrease in M6A modification and a specific decrease in M6A on M6A modification on MYC mRNA. This also led to a decrease in the binding of YTSDF2 in metal 3 knockout cells, which indicates that presence of M6A is important for YTSDF2 binding to MYC mRNA. To further establish it, we generated a M6A binding mutant construct for YTSDF2, and we performed M6 binding experiments, RNA immunoprecipitation experiments with wild type and M6A binding mutant YTSDF2 proteins. And what we observed that a binding activity of YTSDF2 to MYC mRNA is diminished upon the mutation of M6A binding pocket of the protein, which indicates that the binding of YTSDF2 to M6A is essential for its stabilizing effect on MYC. We further explored whether the M6A binding function of YTSDF2 is important for its oncogenic function or whether its effect on the viability of GSCs. For this, we performed a cell viability assay in YTSDF2 depleted cells with the overexpression of wild type and M6A binding mutant YTSDF2 proteins. And we can see that only wild type YTSDF2 protein is able to rescue the depletion of cell viability, whereas M6A binding mutant proteins fail to rescue the effect of YTSDF2 on cell viability. This clearly indicates that M6A binding activity of YTSDF2 regulates the viability of glioblastoma stem cells, and MYC might be one of the important downstream targets of YTSDF2 in glioblastoma stem cells. This is the conclusion that I just established. So we further explored and tried to establish whether MYC is actually the downstream target of YTSDF2 in glioblastoma stem cells, and clearly MYC overexpression in YTSDF2 depleted GSCs was able to rescue the viability of these GSCs, and it was also able to rescue the gene expression profile of YTSDF2 depleted glioblastoma stem cells, establishing MYC as a downstream target of YTSDF2. Now, initially we saw that YTSDF2 has a selectivity for glioblastoma stem cell and not neural stem cells. So we decided to address why YTSDF2 selectively affects glioblastoma stem cells. For this, we performed experiments parallelly in GSCs and NSCs, and we observed that upon YTSDF2 knockdown, the effect of YTSDF2 knockdown on MYC mRNA is present only in glioblastoma stem cell model and not in neural stem cells. We can see both with Western blot and qPCR analysis. We further performed actinomycin D experiment to assess the effect of YTSDF2 depletion on MYC mRNA stability, comparing it between glioblastoma stem cells and neural stem cells. And we see that effect of YTSDF2 on stability of MYC is selective for glioblastoma stem cells. It doesn't affect the stability of MYC in neural stem cells. Similarly, YTSDF2 depletion doesn't affect the viability of neural stem cells. So this establishes YTHDF2 as a selective target for glioblastoma stem cells. Again, the conclusions that I just iterated. So we further moved ahead and we thought that let's identify the downstream targets in this signaling mechanism, YTHDF2 MYC axis. We again looked into the RNA sequencing data set that we obtained after YTHDF2 depletion. And one of the major enriched pathways were IGF binding protein pathway. So for this, we picked IGF-BP3 and we studied the YTHDF2 binding using RNA immunoprecipitation, and we studied the effect of YTHDF2 on the stability of IGF-BP3 mRNA. And as we see that we can observe YTHDF2 binding to IGF-BP3 mRNA, it doesn't affect the stability of the IGF-BP3 mRNA, which indicates that probably IGF-BP3 is not the direct target of YTHDF2. So we asked whether IGF-BP3 levels are regulated by MYC, which is a downstream target of IGF-BP3. But first, we decided to establish the functions of IGF-BP3 in GSCs, and we observed that IGF-BP3 knockdown clearly and very significantly affect the viability and stemness of glioblastoma stem cells. We further mined TCGA data set to study the and find indications of the role of IGF-BP3 in glioblastoma patient tumor. And we see that in patient tumor data set, IGF-BP3 expression is heavily high, and it shows a survival benefit in patients, where the patients with a higher IGF-BP3 expression tend to die sooner. This shows that IGF-BP3 might have an important function for glioblastoma patients. We further established the in vivo functions of IGF-BP3, where IGF-BP3 depletion leads to prolonged survival of the glioblastoma tumor-bearing mice, and it hampers the tumor growth in vivo. Now, we decided to explore the role of IGF-BP3 in YTHDF2 functions. And again, IGF-BP3 overexpression is able to rescue the depletion in cell viability observed in YTHDF2 depleted cells in GSCs. And IGF-BP3, exogenous IGF-BP3 overexpression was able to rescue the deleterious effects upon the tumor growth in YTHDF2 depleted cells. So we have seen previously that YTHDF2 depletion leads to a retardation in tumor growth in mouse models of glioblastoma. But when we overexpress IGF-BP3 in these YTHDF2 depleted tumors, we see a restoration of tumor growth. This again establishes IGF-BP3 as a downstream effector of YTHDF2. Again, so till now we have established a signaling mechanism where M6A, YTHDF2, MYC, and IGF-BP3 seem like a very important signaling axis in glioblastoma, and we have explored the molecular mechanism of YTHDF2 exons in glioblastoma in details. But we also wanted to inform some therapeutic potential for YTHDF2, since it showed selectivity for glioblastoma stem cells, sparing normal neural stem cells. So for this purpose, we again mined Broad Institute drug response data set. This data set comprises the functions of more than 4,000 chemotherapeutic compounds. And the Broad Institute has studied the role of effect of these molecules on the viability of more than 1600 cell lines, different tumor cell lines. And along with the effect of drugs on these cell lines, they have also performed RNA sequencing on those cell lines at the same time, and they have established a data set where you can identify and correlate the expression of a particular gene towards the response of a drug. So we basically correlated the YTSDF2 expression towards the drug response of all 4,000 drugs in all the cell lines that are present in the Broad Institute repository, which is around 1,600 cancer cell lines. And what we see here, that high YTSDF2 expression informs the response towards certain molecules. The top among that was CDK9 inhibitor. Then there is a molecule called JW55, celermide, which is a SIRT1 inhibitor, and lincitinib. The lincitinib specifically caught our attention because lincitinib is a specific inhibitor of IGF-1, IGF-R, and IGF-BP3 pathway. So since we established IGF-BP3 as a downstream target of YTSDF2, and a large data set indicates that IGF inhibitors might be effective in YTSDF2 overexpressing cells, we decided to explore the role of lincitinib in YTSDF2 overexpressing glioblastoma stem cells. And again, we compared them with normal neural stem cells, which have drastically low YTSDF2 level. And as we can see here, the dose-dependent response of lincitinib on glioblastoma stem cells and normal neural stem cells, and even the high 10 micromolar dose of lincitinib doesn't affect the viability of neural stem cell models, whereas it very drastically and significantly affects the viability of all glioblastoma stem cell models tested. So this IGF-1R inhibitor is showing selectivity towards glioblastoma stem cells. We again performed the in vivo experiments in our mouse models, and we see lincitinib oral administration of 75 mg per kg microgram of lincitinib significantly retards tumor growth in the glioblastoma mouse models. So concluding the whole study, we can say that RNA M6A peaks mark and potentially regulate critical cancer-specific genes in glioblastoma in a location and cell type specific manner. YTSDF2 is a specific and potent regulator of GSC viability and stemness. YTSDF2 stabilizes MYC and other important oncogenic transcripts in GSCs. The stabilizing effects of YTSDF2 depends on the presence of RNA M6A modification on its target genes. YTSDF2 represents a GSC-specific dependency that supports glioblastoma growth through GSC-specific stabilization of MYC transcripts. And IGF-BP3 is a downstream target of YTSDF2 MYC axis. And oral administration of IGF-1R inhibitor, lincitinib, inhibits glioblastoma tumor growth in vivo. So all these results were published a few months back in Cancer Discovery. And here is a brief summary of this whole complicated story that neural stem cells, the MYC in neural stem cells lacks M6A modification. Thus, it lacks the YTSDF2 mediated stabilization that we see in glioblastoma stem cells, which in turn induces IGF-BP3 expression and the proliferation of GSCs. So I think we are all, I had few slides for my future directions, but I think we can skip that since we are already hitting the timeline. What do you say,
Dr. Devvrat, if you can take just 5 minutes and to discuss your future research plan, then that would be good. Go ahead.
Okay. So I will go really brief. So apart from all the results that we reported in Cancer Discovery, that was mainly mechanistic study of the YTSDF2 and M6A functions. In RNA sequencing and CLIP dataset, we also observed that several of glucose metabolism genes were direct targets of YTSDF2. So these results are not published yet, and we explored the expression of some of the glucose metabolism regulated genes, and like hexokinase 2, LDHA, enolase 1, and MDS2, and we see a significant downregulation of these genes upon YTSDF2 depletion. We chose these 4 genes because these 4 genes also showed direct binding of YTSDF2 and presence of M6A on their transcripts. Then we performed a gross study looking at the glucose utilization in YTSDF2 depleted cells, and as we say that glycolytic index and glucose utilization is heavily diminished in YTSDF2 depleted cells. So this indicated that there is a connection between the M6A pathway that we have just uncovered and the metabolism of the glioblastoma stem cells. At the same time, a graduate student, MD PhD student in the lab was performing a metabolic tracing experiment in glioblastoma stem cells, comparing them to differentiated glioma cells, and he identified entirely different landscape of metabolites being used by glioblastoma stem cells in comparison to differentiated glioma cells. And as you can see here that glioblastoma stem cells have a very distinct signature of metabolites, and they are different from differentiated glioma cells. So we took the data from metabolite tracing experiment and overlapped it with the M6A dataset in glioblastoma stem cells and performed an enrichment analysis. And to our surprise, the major pathways that seem to be affected with the indicating towards the metabolic signature are RNA methylation, methyltransferase activity, and RNA methylation and RNA modification pathways. So several of RNA modification pathways seem to be heavily affected with the metabolite choice of glioblastoma stem cells. So here is kind of a brief hypothesis where we think that specifically the TCS. So since I'm not presenting the details of the metabolite tracing experiments, I will just give a brief overview. And what we observed that TCA cycle enzymes and the different metabolites like alpha ketoglutarate and fumarate have differential effects on the M6A modifiers, and they can govern the M6A modification pathways in glioblastoma stem cells. I just performed a very simple experiment as a proof of concept where we see that if we treat glioblastoma stem cells with alpha ketoglutarate versus fumarate, we see the overall M6A levels are drastically different. The alpha ketoglutarate treatment leads to a decrease in total M6A levels in the glioblastoma stem cells, where fumarate treatment leads to an increase in M6A modification. So with these observations, my hypothesis is, which I will try to pursue in my future lab, and I will try to study that how metabolic changes govern the epitranscriptomic landscape in glioblastoma stem cells, or for that matter, normal cancers, any cancer models.
Dr. Dikshit, do you mind if I can interrupt you? I'm Dr. Rajiv, speaking from Ahmedabad University.
Yes, Dr. Rajiv, please.
Can go back to a couple of slides behind.
Sir, before we go for the question answer session and any discussion, Dr. Selvamurthy sir is here. So may I kindly request Dr. Selvamurthy sir, please?
Yes.
Well, I'm done with my presentations. So
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Devbrat. Dr. Selvamurthy sir.
It's good presentation, sir.
So until he comes there, can I ask my questions?
Yeah, please.
All right. So, Dr. Dikshit, you mentioned that you have discovered, new landscape of markers which are correlated with aggressiveness, which are basically based on glycolysis, right? Way back in 2008 or 9, Dr. Van der Heyden from Harvard had discovered at least 181 targets in the glycolytic mechanisms, which were correlated with chromatin modification, with the aggressiveness of the cancer, and enunciating the Warburg-Crabtree effect. Have you tried to correlate any of your correlations? You talked briefly about the differentiation of the astrocytomas or glioblastomas to the astrocytes. Any functional experiments have you done of physiological relevance where all these so-called sets of new genes, whether they are upregulated or downregulated, are correlated with the clinical outcomes or rather even the success of the strategies? What's your take on it? Because when you make the transition to your next lab, definitely, and if you plan to come to India, a lot of studies are directed more towards translational and patient-directed outcomes. So it might be pertinent for you to correlate your studies to patient outcomes or viable strategies or novel strategies which will enhance, because I understand that glioblastoma, and secondly, if you look at the strategy adopted by UNC Chapel Hill when they were treating Senator Ted Kennedy way back in 2005 or 6 when he was diagnosed with GBM, you have seen that they have used the glycolytic inhibitors to shrink the size of tumors before excising it. So the glycolytic pathways have been in vogue for last 15, 16 years. But what are the novel insights which it is providing, which will take to improve the patients, or let's say the life expectancy as well as quality and quantity of life of patients? Just I would like to have a physiological perspective to your things. Yes, we can do a lot of genes and a lot of arrays and all those things. But if it is not related to any functional experiments, then I guess it's an exercise beaten in translation.
So just to give a glimpse of the translational potential of the target,
Yes,
from M6A pathway and the metabolic, again, I'm not focusing on glycolysis, the broader metabolic metabolome profile of glioblastoma stem cells.
Several pathways in the unfinished agenda of glycolysis and tricarbonic acid or Klebsiella will create a lot of shunt pathways.
So a simple example is the IGF-BP3, and if you can see here, using the TCGA data set, which has data for almost 1,200 glioblastoma patients, and we can clearly show that with high statistical significance, expression of IGF-BP3 can inform the patient outcome. This is just one example. We have performed correlations for YTSDF2 and the downstream targets that we are kind of exploring. So we have certain targets from metabolic pathway that we can explore in correlation with RNA M6A modification. And the basic, like the one of the most important criteria that we take in selecting our targets is their patient outcome, their effect on patient outcome.
I would like to interrupt you here. Have you also delineated the patient genetics?
In terms of, yeah, it is IDS wild
genetic base.
We take IDS
genetic base.
Yeah, so we have
race-specific markers also are divergently different in terms of their outcomes and potencies.
So answer is yes. We look into the genetic profile that is reported for the patients, and for this, just for again, not going into the details, the brief example here, the data presented here is from only IDH wild type glioblastoma patients, which are the most aggressive glioblastoma patients, because IDH mutation is one such mutation which clearly informs the prognosis of the disease. So the short answer, yes, we look into the genetic.
What is the extent of divergence of genetic base you have? Because you see the Caucasian genetic base is much now, or the Jewish genetic base, or even I would say the African genetic base is much much, much smaller than the Asian genetic race, which can extend from the Chinese Middle
Well,
to India itself, which has got 5 distinct centers of origin. Have those been also taken into account? Because when you are doing, because you know the failure of Vioxx as a drug has prompted even the pharmacy companies to actually not go for one drug for all or one target for all, but to look at the race specificity of the targets when we are trying to enunciate. So I'm just, you know, please don't, I'm just being a devil's advocate, because, you know, when you are taking this from bench
it's more welcome.
translation, no, when you're taking from, you know, it has so often happened that the experiments look very good on paper, especially in preclinical conditions, but the clinical paradigms offer an entirely new exercise. And if they cannot be easily translocated and transported to the clinical paradigm in a seamless manner, then, you know, it creates new problems for the investigator. Just please bear that in mind. It's not a criticism. It's just a advice, because we have burnt our fingers like that earlier also, that not many of the exciting preclinical studies are translated into fruitful clinical outcomes.
So
Can I come for the question?
That's it.
So sadly, just to one line, like 2 lines to answer your question. First, whatever genetic background you have, if you walk in with the aggressive glioblastoma in a clinic, you are not gonna live more than a year.
Yeah,
So
I know that.
basically genetic background is redundant when it comes to the aggressive cancers like glioblastoma. Second, looking at the specific genetic races, the problem is that the data sets available like TCGA, they are mainly data sets curated in USA and Europe. China recently came up with a data set called Chinese glioblastoma dataset CCGA, which we are trying to explore. We have their full data, but again, I don't want to say that we have kind of, it has red flags. So we are still not using their data sets. We don't have data sets available from India and other Asian countries. So first we have to contribute the data before we can mine.
Thank you.
Dr. B.C. Das sir, you are muted. Dr. B.C. Das sir, you are muted, sir. So please unmute yourself.
I wanted to interact here. What Dr. Rajiv was telling is correct, but then question is that his study is all in vitro studies. It is far away from the clinical correlation. That is always a gap. We as a cancer biologist, we know we can get a perfect match results in the in vitro conditions, whether it is a genetic mapping or any other aspects and the inhibitors and all, but clinical correlation or preclinical and clinical correlation is very important to come to the clinic. So if you present to the hardcore clinician this data, they will appreciate and this is fine, but then they will say that it is far away from the anything to do with the patients. So we know it. But then we have to go ahead with the study and to slowly closer to the patients or the clinical study. Then only it has a meaning. There are, when you do this type of study, that generate lot of questions than answers to the problem. It is always any researcher, as I can see, though I do not work on glioblastoma, but I have a huge number of questions in the because I could be, or a person like me or other persons not in the field, they will have the query. They are working in the cancer, but not in this cancer, but then they will have a general query. But what is it? There are a lot of queries. I will come back to that. But then I just wanted to tell Rajiv that it is not, it is clinical at this moment, but it is lot of indications are there. One has to go to the clinical level or preclinical level. Then only one can interpret. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Devbrat, I have a couple of questions, and this is in line of the discussion what Rajiv had with you. So my first question, coming at the translational aspect. So whether you, so what is the whether your approach will increase the immunogenicity of the tumor cell, that the immune cell will be able to pick up more more efficiently, these tumor cells will able to eradicate them more efficiently while getting unaffected metabolically. Number one. Number two,
we have not explored the immunogenicity in.
She has not done.
Yeah, that
There
is
is
true.
no. We have
So
not studied immune response.
I'm just asking his opinion. You know, what is his opinion targeting this IGF and PTY will enhance the immunogenicity by specifically targeting MAP kinases pathway and subsequent MMPs and associated unfolded protein responses.
So
This part he can answer, but the other immunogenicity part he has not worked on.
The one line answer is that we have not explored the immune aspect. All our animal models are immunodeficient mouse. So all studies are performed in immunodeficient mice. So we have in vivo data for almost all every step that we have done. We have performed an in vivo experiment, but these are mouse models in immunodeficient. So we
Devvrat, just in this context, just tell me the one basic question.
Dr. Devvrat, just could you please share your slide?
Okay. I mean, if I may need to show my slides just to answer a few questions.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
You can keep.
So, how you make the knockout? Those are the, I know this is a immunocompromised mice. Is a conditional knockout, cell specific, or it's a total knockout? In the both cases, you are showing that it's THGTF3 as well as IG.
Sir, we generate, we maintain our glioblastoma stem cell lines in mouse continuously. So how our models work, we get a tumor from a patient.
Right.
Surgical, we put it into the mouse. Once the mouse grows, the tumor grows fully, we take out the cells, we implant into the next generation of mouse. So cells are maintained continuously in different generations of mice. When we have to perform a genetic manipulation, what we do, when we take out cells from a mice, we'll subject them to CRISPR or shRNA or siRNA, and then we'll put them back into the mice. So the models are generated by maintaining cells in the mice, and they are manipulated specifically. So these are the knockouts or overexpressions are performed only in the glioblastoma stem cells.
Okay, that's very interesting. What BC Das are also telling, that is, but you have a scope to do a lot of translational things also. So have you tried with your cancer cell to generate the cancer stem cells in vitro, or a kind of spheroids to see the functional effect? Like you have shown, that is, you have used the lincitinib, right? One is of the IGTDF3 inhibitor. So have you tried with that? So that is the mostly translational or functional part. Yes.
So the data here is from the steroids in culture.
Okay.
And the next slide is in the mouse. So every experiment is performed in culture and in the mouse.
But this culture should go to, again, back to the mice model, right? For clinical testing.
Yeah, it goes back to the mouse. Yes, it can go back to mouse.
Okay. Right. I would come at this moment because it has created the initiation. So others are also. So what is it? The question is that ultimately you are taught before it goes to the other audience. So what is it? Did you find which one could act as a target, therapeutic target, so-called therapeutic target, whether it is IgBP3 or IGFBP3 or YTH-DF2? Which one would act as you think that can act as as a therapeutic target?
Sir, ultimate therapeutic target has to be YTH-DF2.
Did you find any inhibitor with that?
Sir, we are working with a chemistry group, like a chemical engineering group at University of Chicago right now, and we are in the process of developing an inhibitors. There are no inhibitors known for YTH-DF2.
But your BP3 is required for your growth of GSCs.
Yes,
that
sir.
You have presented in some slide. And,
yes.
But then it is, I don't see any slide that is it responsible for the stemness or how it is required for the growth of the GSC?
Sir, I have a full slide showing the effect of IGF-BP3 in the.
No, that is right, but that is responsible for stemness of the cells.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We
Oh,
performed.
that slide is not there. That slide is not
Yeah, somehow my slides are not moving.
In fact, YTDH3 you cannot
So
target
here is the
because
slide,
it's upstream of MYC. So how you are targeting that is YTDHF3 because it's an upstream regulator of MYC, right?
Exactly. So that's what
So
I
it's
said.
difficult to target. If you target okay, you can do. Yeah.
So to answer Dr. BC Das, sir, here is the slide, sir, where we have studied the effect of IGF-BP3 on the viability and stemness of glioblastoma stem cells.
No,
So
that
this
you
particular graph,
understand. But how did you prove that it is stemness is maintained? The maintenance stemness is different. But how it
Sir,
is maintained, the stemness of the GSCs?
So that's the this experiment is in limiting dilution assay, which is a direct measure of the maintenance of stemness, and this is what that assay here.
No, there are standard method of the stemness measurement in the cancer cells, the GBM cancer cells or any other cancer cells. So what does it? How these stem cells? We know its reflux potential with that transmembrane protein, the ABCG2. What is there in the GBM?
So he means that did you look for the markers or something?
Where did you look for the markers? It is it is all right. IGP-3, but what is the markers of the stemness that it is maintaining the stemness? How do you prove that they are the cancer stem cells?
So glioblastoma stem cell.
But I am asking that basic thing.
Yes, sir. So answer to that, glioblastoma stem cells are defined by the presence of CD133 as a surface marker, and all the models that we select, we have like parallel for both CD133. So if we get a patient tumor from clinic, first thing we do.
So one marker, you see, one marker is not sufficient. You can see our the OncoTarget paper 2 years back.
Exactly.
One of our students, Subrata Sinha, and myself and joint student Akanksha were there. And then whose PhD thesis on this GBM stem cell and also cancers. Yeah.
Sir, honestly, even a combination.
If I may continue on that line, because we also, when I was at the clinic, I also looked at CD133 is not a very good reliable marker for glioblastoma stem cells. Dr. Dixit, I think you are quite aware of that. That work came out from Dr. Singh's lab initially, but there's a lot of controversy on whether CD133 is a good reliable marker for glioblastoma stem cells. So definitely we will have to look at the ABCG promote pumps, and we have to look at OCT4 and NANOG and Nestin, because we also looked at some of this when there is an inverse correlation between your expression of the glial proteins and as the stemness goes up, there is an increase in Nestin. But it does not correlate at all with CD133 at all. And I know, when I was there was a controversy between our group and the Dr. Jeremy Rich's group, because he would definitely depend on CD133. But I think there is a lot of data right now where CD133 is not a very good marker for GSCs. Your comments, please.
Sir, totally agreed with you and with Dr. Das. Even a combination of markers are not sufficient to truly identify or isolate a stem cell. That's why even I was in my second slide, when I was defining the stem cells, we can define a cancer or glioblastoma stem cells only by its phenotype. So any cell which is capable of giving rise to a fully heterogeneous tumor, we take it as a stem cell. So to assay the stemness, we again depend on the self-renewal and tumorigenicity, and we don't rely on any markers. That's why I said whenever we are assaying tumorigenicity and stemness, we are performing a limiting dilution assay. So I will summarize the assay in a minute. In this assay, what we do, we will take glioblastoma stem cells. We'll do serial dilution to reach to one cell stage. So we'll serially dilate them to 1 cell, 10 cell, 100 cell, 1000 cell. They will be put in a culture dish, and at the same time, they will be put in a mice. And we see how many, and we, with this serial dilution, we look for the number of spheres formed in culture and the tumor formation in vivo. And from there, we perform this statistical analysis to calculate the frequency of a stem cell. We don't rely on any surface marker. That's what I was trying to say, that we don't rely on surface markers.
Are these CD131 positive cells also positive for CD44?
So, for high-grade glioblastoma, 80% of cells are CD44 positive.
Okay, Dr. Dixit.
Whereas 2 to 3% cells you will find CD133 positive. CD133 is not a good marker for stem cells, but CD133 positive cells are at least 10-fold more tumorigenic than CD133 negative cells. So by far, it's still the gold standard if one wants a molecular marker for stemness. If we are taking tumorigenicity as an attribute of a stem cell.
No, that's correct. That you are very correct. Ultimately, you have to show that, but you have seen the sphere formation, dilution, but you have not injected the spheres in the mice.
No, sir, we do in vivo limiting dilution assay as well. So our in vivo experiments are from these spheres.
Okay, but then what I was saying that is there any study you have done that the drug resistance, the tumor, the cancer stem cells are drug resistant? Any reflux protein you have studied?
Yes, sir, I have not studied the drug resistance. That's not my, I mean, as I said, I'm more interested in RNA modification and RNA mechanisms. So I have not done any drug resistance experiments. But yeah, I know lab mates who have done EGFR inhibitor, like drug resistant, like EGFR
resistant experiment, no, that acts as a marker, you know. So the stem cell would be, this is indirectly a marker.
Yes.
SLS marker also because they are the molecule like ABCG2 in breast cancer and other cancers. They are responsible for the reflux of the cytotoxic drugs.
Exactly, sir. So it's not the field of my study, but I know my colleagues who work on EGFR resistance and drug resistance.
Fine.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt here. There are a couple of questions from the participants. First question I see here, Dr. Hridesh Prakash. He has asked whether targeting MAP kinase would be sufficient for enhancing immunogenicity of tumor cells and would break immune surveillance mechanism. Also, do you think that targeting MMP can also influence the metastatic index of tumor cells in vivo?
Devbrat already answered, I guess.
Yes, kind of. And honestly, I have not studied neither MMPs nor MAP kinases. MMPs have been studied in context of metastasis, but most of the studies that you find that they claim to talk about metastasis, they are doing experiments in culture days. So it's under question.
Okay, another question from Dr. Jitendra. He has asked if you could throw some lights on the possible epitranscriptomics mechanism involvement in IGF-BP3 as a connecting link between obesity and GBM. So is there any role of IGF?
Very interesting question. And IGF and insulin signaling has very profound role both in obesity and in glioblastoma. So I think it's an amazing question, and we need to. Anything I will say will be a hypothesis or a speculation, but I'm sure if studied, there we will find a link.
But there are a few articles already in the done by some researchers that they have found a connecting link between this marker and obesity and glioblastoma.
RNA-M6 has I think there are a couple of papers studying M6A modification and its changes with insulin signaling. But I'm not aware of something which has which has established a link between obesity and glioblastoma, keeping M6A modification in mind.
Another
but
question.
Possible.
Yeah, another question from Dr. Girish Sharma. He has asked Dr. Dixit, are these preclinical work is in the environment condition? What does it mean? Preclinical work is in the environment condition.
Means I think he means that
I think he's talking about
was maintained.
Tumor microenvironment. Yes.
Yeah.
I believe.
Some more questions. Some more questions are there. How was YTHDF2 gene knocked out? By what?
Why I'm not able to see these questions?
This is in a chat box.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in this study, we have used all three methods, CRISPR, shRNA, and siRNA to knock out YTHDF2. We have used different methods in different experiments, and we have also used multiple methods to study the effect on viability and MYC stability. So we wanted to make sure that it's the YTHDF2 depletion which is causing the effects and not a non-specific effect of a CRISPR guide RNA or shRNA. So we've used all three methods.
Yeah. Another question from Dr. Pankaj Sharma is in the chat box. Dr. Dixit, excellent presentation. You started with RNA modification, moved to MYC and YTHDF2, then to IGBF3, and finished with IGF1R. So it's a compliment for you, Dr. Dixit. Dr. Sushant Singh, he has asked, nice presentation, sir, quite explorative and knowledgeable. It's from MIT Chandigarh. I was a postdoc in Sanford Burnham Institute.
Sanford Burnham?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he said that working on metabolic lab with the Professor Parish Shami. I don't know whether you know.
Okay,
boss.
I know.
Yeah. Another question, what is your opinion is that ideal target on light of your studies? Means what is the ideal target from your studies that you want to say?
Professor, I think he has already answered that, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
can we take some question, can we ask some question actually?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Pallavi, please go ahead.
Thank you. And first, I would say it was an excellent work and definitely equally
Thanks,
excellent
Pallavi.
presentation. Thank you, Dr. Dixit. And I have a few questions, but the time is limiting, so I will just go for one or two. One thing was the last experiment with IGF-1R inhibitor, where you clearly see that it can reduce the tumorigenesis in the mice. I was wondering what was the fate of YTHDF in that. Can you say something on that? Can you
mean
hear
that
me?
the effect of drug treatment on YTHDF2 levels?
Exactly. Yes.
There was no change, and it was asked by one of our reviewers. So thanks for asking that again.
Yeah, because if you are making the story with YTHDF2, so there has to be a connecting link. So that's why I thought
our story shows that YTHDF2 sits on the top of the whole pathway. So M6A modification, YTHDF2 binding to M6A modification leads to stabilization of MYC mRNA, leading to increased MYC protein levels. In turn, increased IGF-1 pathway and IGF-BP3 levels. And lincitinib is an inhibitor of the IGF-BP3. So this is on the bottom of the whole pathway. We don't see a feed-forward loop there. We tried to study effect of MYC on YTHDF2 as well. That was a reviewer was really after our life. They wanted us to show something connecting the feedback, but there was nothing. We have done a whole
but you did
lot of experiments.
You did show the rescuing of YTHDF2 by IGF-BP.
Yeah, so that shows that IGF-BP3 is a downstream target of YTHDF2.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So the other question was, Yeah. So in the initial slides, how you started your story, you know that M6A genes, like M6A modification in genes, it's differential in stem cell compared to neural stem cell, like in cancer stem
Yes.
cell, right?
Yes.
So if that is differential, but you targeted the reader, but you even though you looked at the writers and maybe the demethylase as well, but the story is weaker on that part, right? So I'm just not able to understand that, or what is your opinion on how methyl transferase and demethylases playing a role in this differential methylation of RNA?
So again, it's like a very good question and complicated. I will try to answer you with the example, like say, let's take a more well-studied modification, say histone acetylation or histone methylation. Any modification of any macromolecule, when you look at global pattern, you see changes. But eventually the molecules which translate that signal can be targeted in a specific context and actually are important for a particular disease or a context. So the readers and writers, so I'm not saying they are not targetable or we should not target them. But the point is, if we target writers or erasers, means methyl transferases or demethylases, we'll see a global change. If you look at my data, when I knock out metal 3, you see like 80% decrease in total M6A levels. Idea is to target the molecules which can translate the signal of a modification. So readers are those proteins which translate the signal of any modification, say it be histone, methylation, or protein phosphorylation, or anything. So the readers are the proteins which translate.
Yes.
I'm not saying that they are the most important, but I think they are form the node of a target where you can target. So say, if we want to target MYC, we better target the reader. Yeah. The downstream signal is gone and MYC mRNA is unstable. So again, I'm not saying that we should not study or not target readers or writers. All I'm saying that probably the molecules which are translating the signal downstream might form more lucrative targets in terms of targeting a particular pathway or disease.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. As you know that BRD4 inhibitors are so, like they
Exactly.
are already FDA approved in leukemia. So that makes much sense. And of course, we know that whether it's Ajax or whatever, they are all getting FDA approved. So that's a huge field. Yeah, thanks a lot. Last question. Any co-partners of YTHDF2? You know why I asked this, because there is a
ask this question after a year. I'll publish it. I'm on it.
Okay, I will look forward to it. Thank you from my side.
Great. Thank you, Pallavi. I think we are running out of time. It's already 12:30.
One more question.
Yeah.
A small question. So, Dr. Dikshit, you worked on microRNAs also. So,
yes.
Had you looked any microRNA targeting this YTHDF2?
I've not studied in context of YTHDF2. I did a whole genome microRNA screen in glioblastoma stem cells. It's a screen which comprises the microRNA mimics and hairpin inhibitors of all 1900 something microRNAs that were known until 2012. So the library was curated in 2012. So I think more microRNAs are added into that. But we have screened like 1952 microRNAs for their hairpin inhibitors and mimics. We have a whole bunch of microRNAs indicating towards a particular pathway of microRNA biogenesis pathway. The manuscript is, I would say, 80% ready in terms of experiments, but it will require some effort before it sees the light of publication. It will be exciting manuscript, but it has definitely, I've not correlated it with the M6A pathway yet.
Yeah, so before I close, just one compliment I would like to give to Dr. Devbrat. It's an excellent presentation. And what I see, there is a big hope in this work, because I work on a cancer metabolism. And what I see in the last few slides we have discussed, there is no correlations of the drugs which are already inhibiting glioblastoma cancer, okay, with YTH-DF2. As a bioinformatician, I see how I can identify a new inhibitor for YTH-DF2, and then we can use combinatorial therapeutic approach for this.
Exactly.
So we can already, yeah, so we can use a new inhibitor for YTH-DF2, and at the same time, we can inhibit another target, which are already FDA approved in the market. So there will be an easy way to repurpose, okay, the drug for these glioblastoma cells. And
perfect comment, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, so yeah,
in past 2-3 years in Rich Lab we are mining the drug response data set very frequently, and we have been trying to identify different combinations. Some of them work, most of them don't, again, because I don't know how drugs work, but we are able to identify some really functional combinations as well. So
great.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and we must mine it.
Yeah, I would say that's a great work, and it's we look forward to work in this direction ahead. So great.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And again, I will like to thank everybody. And if I'm not able to take few questions, or if I'm not able to answer satisfactorily to any question, Drew, please share my email ID. And let's continue this conversation. Let's continue this conversation. Let's find ways where we can collaborate. And even like start working even before I'm back in India. So I would love to keep talking about it. And it has been an amazing 1.5 hours. I still feel energetic at 12 in the night. So it seems like we had really illuminating conversation.
Great.
And thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So with this, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the presenter, Dr. Devvrat Dixit, all the panel members, Dr. B.C. Das sir, and Dr. Rajiv sir, Dr. Selvamuthi sir, though he is busy in another meeting. He told me that he will come in the at the end. Dr. Pallavi, Dr. Amit, Dr. Subrajit Biswas, Dr. Rajiv Janardhan, Dr. Hridesh Prakash, Dr. Pankaj Sharma sir, for asking such good questions. And with this, I would like to thank at the end to the participants, those who have participated in this webinar. And with the permission of Dr. B.C. Das sir, may I close this session now? Dr. B.C. Das sir?
Yes, please go ahead with the not the list, with the thanks to Honorable Founder President and our Chancellor and the Dynamic Chancellor and our Vice Chancellor. So thank you for organizing this, and it's an excellent meeting, and he has presented very nicely, very high standard of work, but certainly there is a need for clinical correlations. So then only it will be beneficial to the humankind. So I would say to Dr. Devvrat, it is an excellent work, but there is now time to translate to the bed to the clinic to the bench to bedside. So that is the beauty in that. So we all scientists work on bench, but ultimate aim is to, when it is translated to the clinic, then you have the maximum benefit and maximum name, fame, and everything. So, and that is, beyond that is you come to the service of the humanity. So that is what should be the aim of the life. So thank you so much. All the best.